Welcome back to Roundtail Restoration, everybody. My name is Chris. This is the front Zenith-Stromberg 175 CD carburetor to my 1964 Triumph TR4. This guy's been completely rebuilt, so I went from a completely stripped, torn down carburetor and built it back up, refurbishing everything with rebuild kits. If you want to learn how to do that, this is the video for you. So, thanks for watching. Let's get it sorted. Before we get started, I just wanted to point out that I'm focusing on the front carburetor here. The rear carburetor is very similar, especially to the internal carburetor itself. When it starts to get different is the linkages and things like that. So just keep note of that as you take stuff apart, take pictures, take notes, whatever you need to do, so that when you go to put it all back together, it all goes back together properly. But again, I'm just going to be pointing out the front stuff here. I also, at the bottom, you'll see where I put proper names of certain parts. Either the workshop manual just calls it a lever, while the parts manual, the spare parts catalog for the TR4 is much more descriptive and calls out what that lever actually is and things like that. So between my chapters and the text that I'm going to put at the bottom here, I'll try to spell that out for you so it's clear what's going on. So here we go. So you can see here is a plethora of parts. I got everything clean, zinc plated for the stuff that I wanted to get zinc plated, disassembled, degreased, mostly cleaned up, and ready to go back together. So like I had mentioned, the workshop manual doesn't really provide a whole lot of guidance on this, but it does give me an exploded view, which will at least get the carburetor back together. I am concerned about the float height, and it does give you on how to do that in here and centralizing the jets and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, like I mentioned, I'm just putting the thing back together. So I'm going to start on the bottom first, and mainly just because this is a real nice surface here to be able to keep everything nice and flat. So I've got a couple things that are going to go in here. The float, the float needle valve for the fuel delivery. And I mentioned, I think, that I've got a new float, and this one is good for ethanol fuels. So these are all, if you look, you can see that this is all Zenith-Stromberg genuine parts. So you can still get all this stuff. I got most of my stuff here from Rimmers, but I believe that Moss and carries them. Roadster Factory might start to carry them. I'm not sure if they have any yet, but I'll put links in the description for where you can get all this stuff. But I got a float kit, and then I essentially have just essentially a gasket pack, and it's got all the O-rings and seals and all that kind of stuff. The needle, as far as I'm concerned, was good to go. I didn't need to replace that. And everything else, like I said, these were pretty in pretty good shape. Everything else looked to be okay. One other thing I did get was that plastic thing that I mentioned here for that unfortunately you can't find anymore. So one nice thing about the gasket kit is there's 3 O-rings in here. 2 of them are included with the jet assembly, and then another one's internal to the jet. So all 3 of them really are with the jet assembly, and that all came with that. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the valve in for the float, and then get the washer for that. And then we'll put the float on, set the float height, put that bottom cover on, and then we'll look at doing the jet. So right here you can see this is all the stuff, well, not this, but this is all the stuff that came with the rebuild kit, or the gasket kit, I should say. But you've got the clips here that go on the starter bar. You got the washers for the float valve, so that's nice. Got these star washers here that also go on the shafts. All 3 of the O-rings here. You got this little clip right here is for lifting the float. So everything looks to be pretty well included. So that's convenient. But again, you've got like a thick aluminum washer, a real thin aluminum washer, and one in the middle, and lining it up with the ones I took off. That one in the middle is the one that I want. So that's what I'm going to use for the float valve. So the float valve goes right here. So I got the brand new one here. Put that washer on there. And since this is an aluminum washer, it's going to act as a crush washer a little bit. So I'll just want to go ahead, right? You don't want the fuel to come in and leak through there and just continually fill that float bowl, which will obviously is going to mess everything up. You'll flood the carb out. So you want to make sure that if you do ever remove these, you renew that washer every time. And these are about a 1/2 inch. It looks just like a little bit bigger than a 1/2 inch. The old one was a 1/2 inch. It's interesting. So let me grab a wrench here. All right, just enough to crush that aluminum a little bit. So now that's good. So we got the brand new float. And as I said, it's should be ethanol free. And if you look at the old one here, it's maybe ethanol clean. I don't know. As far as I know, the car hasn't been on the road since the 90s. so I'm not real sure. But they're pretty much the same here, but you can, I don't know if you can see that texture that's in that guy, so that's, I didn't even test it, I just decided to buy a new one. So that kind of goes in like this, and then you've got a little bar that goes through. And this bar, and you're probably not going to be able to see it that well, but if you can see on this end here, that bar's got two little notches cut into it, and you've got this little funny looking clip here. So we're going to go through with the bar, grab the float holes, and it goes almost all the way through, but not quite. And what you do is you line up that those two little notches I showed you, one notch is on this side of the standoff, and the one notch is on the inside. So you come in with that little clip, and you clip it across the front there, and that just is going to prevent that bar from coming out. So now that's that guy. So that's in there. Now, as far as the float height goes, we'll get that set up real quick. New float valve did come with instructions here, and what it says for the 175 CD, you want your float height, so literally the height of the float above this plane here, the flat of where the cover is going to go on, and the height of that tip of the float, according to, again, the Zenith stuff here, 17 to 18 millimeters. According to the workshop manual, however, it's 18.5 millimeters or 0.73 inches. Yep, so real quick conversion there with handy dandy Google. 18 millimeters is about 0.708 or so, so 0.71, give or take. So I'm going to just call it 0.7 here, and we're going to look at this, measure that up, and if anything, it's right at 0.7, maybe even a little low. So I'm going to bend the tab, and what it does, it tells you to bend the tab, and all I'm trying to do is you bend that tab, and I'm going to bend it towards the float valve a little bit, and that's going to lift this guy up. So I've got a real small pair of a needle nose here. I'm just going to ever so slightly bend this tab down. Measure again. I don't know how much difference I made there. Try that again. Here I can see the bend in it. All right, so that's right about 0.7, just a little bit over 0.7. So that's good. So as far as I'm concerned, that float is set. I got a new washer, and the float valve is in there. So that's done. So we'll put the gasket on and put the bottom cover on. So as far as this gasket goes, like I had mentioned, the kit came with, the gasket kit came with one, so I got two of these now, so we'll set one aside. I don't use any gasket adhesive or anything on my carburetors, just because pain in the rear to get all that stuff cleaned off, and I do tend to take them apart relatively frequently. So now we got that guy on there, so we'll just take this cover, get that set up. I've got 6 screws under here, or excuse me, 8 screws under here, 3 of which are shorter than the others. So the 3 short ones go in the front here, and the 5 long ones go in the back. So we're going to get them all kind of started, and I was able to get these all zinc plated. Just going to get everything started, but not tightened down yet, so that I can get that gasket lined up. So there's that. Bottom cover's on. Next up, we'll get the jet here, and the bushing screw and all that kind of stuff. Now notice there's an O-ring here. I think I had pointed out, you can see those little chunkies there. That's an O-ring that goes around the actual adjustment screw here. And then you have all of the stuff for the jet itself, and there's a little O-ring with that as well. So we're going to go ahead and get this O-ring off of the what's this thing properly called? The bushing screw. Just because I don't care about this O-ring, I'm just going to use a piece of metal here. Yeah, I can see where it's kind of cracking a little bit. So this definitely is good to get renewed. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that seating surface off up in there, just so it gets it sits really well. I'll get that cleaned up, and then a little bit of oil on here like I usually do, and we'll get that new O-ring on there. All right, I got the O-ring started here. I am going to go grab my orange stick real quick and just pry it over that little collar there, and it'll be ready to go down. All right, so got that guy in there. Now for the next size, we'll go in this guy. It's got a little bit more threading to go over. Don't want to chew it up if I can help it. Going over the threads. Try to roll it. There you go. It doesn't fit at the top of the threads. It fits over that next collar and then inside that groove. Alright, so we got that. Make sure the O-ring spins in there pretty freely. So the workshop manual does tell you how to put this this conglomeration together here, the whole jet assembly itself. So you got the jet here, and then next up is the spring. It's a pretty heavy duty spring on here. I did not zinc plate that guy. And then you've got a washer, and there's a brass washer, and thankfully these washers are only, there's two of them, one's aluminum and one's brass, or maybe not aluminum, but a white metal, and they're sized in such a way that you can't really put them on wrong. So this brass washer fits down in the center of that guy over top of the jet, and then you got your O-ring, so the O-ring fits in there, and then you've got the collar here, jet bush. And the O-ring, you can see there's a groove in there. The O-ring's going to fit in that groove. And that gets all good. And then the white metal washer goes over top of that. And then this all fits down inside the jet bush here. And then this guy goes in this way. And then all that screws in to the bottom of the carburetor. So we're going to turn the carburetor over, or at least get it so I don't lose stuff. Ooh. How did I lose that O-ring? Guess I got an extra O-ring. No, I put the old one on. Shoot. All right, I almost made a rookie mistake there. I thought I had an extra O-ring, but I was putting the old O-ring back on. So the old O-ring, I'm going to show you, is hard as a rock. So definitely want to replace these O-rings, especially if it's been a while. But anyway, we got the carb body inverted now. We'll go ahead. Oh, don't forget your silver washer and the collar. So get that guy on there. O-ring fits in nice and snug, and that goes in, and it essentially just threads in. Now that's a 5/8 inch, but we're just going to cheat here and use our adjustable. And that O-ring's going to go in there. And then this here tells you can use a coin, the actual adjustment screw there. So we'll call that good. So now you can see down the center, well actually you can't, but if you look down the center, centering the jet is what we need to worry about, and that thing is not even remotely centered. So we're going to be playing with that a little bit. And I can remember from my SU carburetor days, it's not a lot of fun. But we're going to come back to that in a second, and we'll continue assembly. Next, what we're going to do here is assemble the air valve and it's assembly, or it's a diaphragm. And if you remember, this is not a whole lot to this. Got the air valve on there. Put the diaphragm on there. There's a little notch right there, and then there's another little notch in here that's going to help us line up the cap when I go to put the cap on, or the cover. And then you've got this little guy right here, and you can probably barely see, you've got like a bead almost in here, and there's a little depression in here where that bead's going to go. And all you need to worry about with the cap is lining up the screws. There is no notch in the bottom of the cap. And 4 little flathead screws. That tight. So that's nice and tight. And then we're going to go ahead and put the jet in. So this the jet says, I thought they were lettered, and I think they are, but this jet says 022. I'm not sure what's up there. I'll have to look that up. But the jet I only took off just to make sure it was good to go. And then that's got a little retaining screw on it, a little brass guy. Drop that in there. You need a pretty long tweaker to get in there. But then that tightens down. And I just set the jet all the way down, not worrying about the height of it. So we'll set that aside. Come back to the body now. We're going to start putting some shafts in. First thing we'll do is the butterfly shaft. So I got to get the butterfly valve back out. And I had mentioned, I believe, that these have already been rebushed. So that's a good deal for me. I don't have to send them away that way. So the butterfly valve goes in. The shaft has got to go in first, and the butterfly valve is going to get put in. And you've got one end of this throttle shaft that's threaded, the other end that's not. So you just want to make sure that that you're looking at the right end. And the workshop manual, the orientation in the pictures like this, and the threaded side comes out where this big tube sticks out. So that's going to be my reference. That's the fuel supply. So we'll put the shaft in, and it goes threaded end in, or the smooth end first. And you leave the slot for the butterfly valve kind of straight up, and then the beveled, you can see this is beveled here and this is not. We're going to leave the beveled end pointing towards the bottom of the carburetor, and then put the butterfly valve in, and then that should go like that and close when you turn it, and then that opens up those screws available for you to tighten them. One thing I will point out about the screws, probably really can't see it that well, but they're split ends. And what that allows you to do is kind of open them up and spread them out once you get this tightened down, and it kind of locks them in so they don't shake or rattle, vibrate out or anything. Now, I'm not going to do that now. I'm not going to worry about that until I know that these things are kind of done. All right, so there's that. And you just want to kind of make sure that that operates nice and smooth, and it shouldn't jiggle in the bush, and it doesn't. It can move back and forth like this, but it should not move around. If you get a lot of play when you take this and you kind of spin it around, if you're getting a lot of play in there, you need to look at doing new bushings. So there's that guy. Next up is going to be the starter bar. That's this guy, and if you remember, we've got new circlips for the end of that. So we'll get that guy in, get the old circlips off. This shaft is down here, and again, the threaded end goes on the same side. This one's a little bit different because you can see it's got that big notch cut out of it, like a half circle. So you want that notch to be flat where it goes into the bridge. All right, so the bridge down on the carburetor is down here where that needle is. So when you put this in, you want to make sure that that flat part is kind of facing up. And it doesn't really matter right now, but you don't want to put it in upside down. If you can see, I'm sorry the lighting's not that great. If you can see down there, me spinning that thing, you don't want to put it where it's pointing up because it's going to mess everything up. So then those notches for these circlips just barely come out, which is perfectly fine. So we'll get this guy in here. And then get this other guy in. All right, and then make sure it turns. Make sure those circlips are fully seated. And so there's the starter bar. So next up, just because I'm thinking of it, this is the lifter. What's it properly called here? I always forget this stuff. This is the 54. This is the pin. That's a nice technical name for it. Anyway, this is what you're going to use when you want to lift the air valve to test the tune of the carb. So you've got the pin itself, and you got a little spring on it. And then inside that, getting it from the rebuild kit, is just one of those little circlip guys. And this fits in over here in this hole here, and it comes up and through, and I'll show you that here real quick. So the pin head itself goes down through the body of the carburetor in there like that, and then the spring goes on here. Kind of hold the spring back with my thumb, if you can see that, and then grab the little clippy, lock it in like so. So what you can do is, as you want to tune the carb, you lift up on your, push up on that thing, and what I'll do is that'll lift that air valve, and you can test the carburetor and the tuning of the carburetor. Very similar in respects to the SU carburetor. So now the workshop manual, I just noticed here, it says when required, the jet needle must be renewed by one bearing the same code number, and I think mine's good, but it says the shoulder of the needle must be fitted flush with the lower face of the air valve. So I did not do that, so we'll go back and fix that mistake. So we'll loosen up this pin, retaining pin a little bit. We'll lift that guy up until that just sits flush. I'll use my little machinist rule here. Try to pull the pin out, and I can't, so that must be flush. And tighten that guy down, so that's job done. We're going to finish assembly on this cap here and put the cap on. So I mentioned that you've got this little notch that's in there, and if you look at your cap here, or excuse me, if you look at the body here, you see that there's a notch over here. So I know that that guy is going to fall in like that, and that fits over there, so that's good. And then we'll come in with the cap here, and the cap only fits one of two ways because the 4 screw holes are not symmetrically opposed. So that one would fit, but if you turn it, this one's not going to fit. So turn it again and it'll be okay. So now just because I'm a geek a little bit, I know that this is where the engine's going to mount like this, right? So this is going to be towards the engine, and I want to be able to look and read when I look down on top of the car. I want to be able to look and read Stromberg 175 CD. So I'm going to put it so that I can read it looking at from the air filter side. We also have the big adjustment spring in there, or the big rebound spring, whatever that's properly called. So we'll put that guy in there. Come in with this, like so. Make sure that diaphragm is still sitting in the little notch. So we're going to do the throttle linkage first. Unfortunately, some of the stuff that I forgot to zinc plate goes on the starter bar, so I'm not going to be able to do that. Notice that the throttle linkage here, where the etched out portion where the threads are, and it's kind of squared off. Make sure that when that throttle is fully closed, that should be in this direction as opposed to, you know, something else. If not, you've got the butterfly in wrong or something's going on and you're not going to be able to get stuff to line up. So the first thing we'll do is the spring that looks like this with a real long finger. That's going to go on. This shorter finger is going to fit under this notch here, like so. And then we got this piece of linkage, looks like this, essentially the idling portion. This little arm right here is going to pick up this long portion of the spring. The spring's not real tight, so you can just push that down, get the linkage piece on there, and that's going to sit down like that. And if you can tell how that is kind of orientated there, hopefully. Give you another camera angle here since my lighting is still not the best. You can see that. So now that that is like so, next up is going to be, looks like this guy, and that's going to fade or move out like that. And then we're going to get one of those star washers, one of the new ones. And then one of the nuts that I did remember to zinc plate. And I believe these are 7/16. Another thing that we can put in here is the idle adjustment screw. This is one that I forgot to zinc plate. I got the spring, but I did not get the screw itself. That's going to fit into this portion right here, and that's going to allow you, as you screw down, you can see this arm here would come into contact with that, and that's going to push down on it, and pushing down on it's going to open the throttle. So that's how you're going to adjust the idle. So we'll put that in just for the purposes of the video, but I will go back in a future me and zinc plate it. And again, it's got that spring so that it's got some tension on it. All right, next up we're going to put this little ball screw in here, for lack of a better name to call it. That is going to be where the throttle actually is coming from the passenger compartment, and that's going to connect up there, and then that would be, you'd pull down on that and that would open the throttle up. And like I said, we'll go ahead for the purposes of the video get the starter bar stuff going here. So you got this funky looking spring like that, and it's got arms on it, and the arm, you can see one arm is straight and the other one's kind of crooked. That crooked one is going to go in first, and you got to look at the picture there to kind of get a feel for what it's actually going up against. But that fits all the way down in there, and it just kind of sneaks in under this fuel supply line. And then we got the big piece that I did not zinc plate. This is where the choke line is going to come in. This that's hence the name of starter bar. So this is the piece that the choke is going to come in on, and you can see that that's not been zinc plated yet. So we'll go ahead and get that guy on there, and it's going to kind of fit down with the imagine that you're pulling on that, right? So that's got to face away. So that's going to do that like so. And then you got this guy next. It's got a little notch cut out of it though, and that's what's going to pick up that other side of the spring. And again, that picks up that side of the spring. Right, so it's going to go like that. So you want it to be able to rebound. So that's why that's picking up the spring there. And when you pull on the choke, that's going to go like that. So now we'll get the starter washer and another 7/16 nut. There's a real light spring that's going to go between this arm here and this arm here. So you got to try to fish that around. Like so. I think all that does is really keep these things in kind of close contact. And then finally you got this screw and lock washer, and that's an adjustment there, and that's kind of go through here, and I believe that gets a nut on top of it. No, I misspoke. That lock washer goes for the ball here for the what's it called? Throttle. This nut goes down here, and that gets screwed up on this guy, and it's going to act as a locking nut. Because now here, this lever here, that is threaded, so it's going to come all the way through. And you can see that this is getting close here, and then essentially what that allows to happen is it will control the rebound here from the choke while also interacting with the throttle of the idle. So it's a kind of a complicated communication there, but it all kind of fits together. So a couple things I want to show you real quick. So again, this is where the choke attaches, and this is where the throttle would come in. So when you would open the throttle, here's your butterfly valve, right? You would pull down, press on the gas pedal, and that would cause this linkage to actuate like that, and obviously would open the throttle. And that's pretty simple. Not a whole lot to that. If I want to pull the choke, I would be pulling from this guy down here, where you can see it looks like it's a copper or brass piece. That choke would pull. And then if you watch here, you can see this is going to act as a cam, and that's going to tend to lift that throttle. So when you pull the choke back, not only does it actuate the starter bar, which I'll have to come around and show you what's happening in there, but it also causes, based on the position of this adjustment screw right there, it causes you to open the throttle a little bit without putting your foot on the pedal, and that's what allows you to get that more fuel for the more air that you're sucking in as you try to start the car in cold weather. So I'll let that guy go, and then as you push the choke in, all that comes back down, idle should slow down and all that good stuff. Now because my air valve is giving me fits a little bit, it's not landing on the bridge because I haven't centralized it yet. See if I can get a better camera angle for you here. So here's the air valve moving up and down like that, and it's not going to go all the way down, but it's going to get pretty close. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that choke back, and you're going to see that starter bar lift up that air valve, at least I hope. See that starter bar come up, and now it's lifting up that air valve. So now what's causing that to happen now is now you are lifting the piston up and out of the way and allowing less air but more fuel into the carburetor, right? It kind of comes up and blocks. If you can see, it almost makes a wall there and blocks everything off. So it lifts the piston up and out of the way and essentially blocks it off. So now you're just dumping a lot of fuel in, running really, really, really rich for your choke, dumping a lot of fuel in there, and then making you a little easier to start in cold weather. Last thing I need to put on is this nylon transition piece here. I can't remember what the heck the thing's called. I'll throw something up real quick. But there is a really small orifice in there. I got a little piece of 16 gauge copper wire, 14 gauge, something like that I used to hang my parts on when I'm zinc plating. So I want to just make sure and get that started through that hole and get that cleaned out in case there's any gunk that's built up in this over time. And it's on the inside of the throttle body. So when you got to open the throttle up, and then you can pass that wire all the way through, just so you can see it there. So you just make sure that's clean, and then we'll go ahead and just get this guy screwed in, which is not going to turn all the way because the bottom cover's on. So I'm not going to bore you with taking that bottom cover off, but obviously you want to do that and get that thing tightened down. Obviously you don't want to go too tight because you might strip the thing out, but with the exception of some zinc plating, there's that carburetor refreshed, and hopefully got to do the jet centering thing a little bit better, but hopefully that's the rebuild. So when we get to the point where we're ready to actually start to tune this thing and make it matter, then we'll get that jet centering figured out. All right, everybody, that's all I got. Thanks so much for watching. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Well, we've got that carburetor rebuilt. Got both of them rebuilt, actually. Ready to go on the car at some future date, whenever that may be. So thanks for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Cheers.